We're smack in the middle of a series called The Whole Holy Life. And for those of you who haven't been here the first couple of weeks, what's it about? Well, on the one hand, this series is about how to experience and get closer to God, whatever name you want to give to that, to get closer to God anytime, anywhere, any situation. How to bring the holy from this one little part of life alongside everything else that you do, and try to bring it into your life wholly, W-H-O-L-L-Y. So that's one side of things. The other side of things is the whole holy life is about these particular moments that we go through where there's a special opportunity, but it's more than an opportunity. You just can't help. It's a flash in front of you. You can't help but be connected to God in that. So last week we looked at birth. And this is the kind of time when life is just bigger. Something happens there. Something breaks in. And it doesn't matter what you believe or what practices you follow or what your worldview is. Something about that moment is just sacred. Whoever you are, you can't help but be surrounded by that. That the world has changed at this moment. And then, for those of you who have gone through that, does that disappear? That sacredness, does it just disappear after birth? Or do we get really preoccupied with our own lives? Or is it possible that something, the Spirit lingers around and tries to help us grow and tries to help the young people grow? That's what today's about. What do we do with God as we grow up, whatever that means to us? Some of us are still growing up in some sense. And what do we do with God when we're learning lessons and making mistakes and starting to figure out, finally, who is this person that is me? What do we do with God through that hell that is adolescence? Many of us dealt with. So here's how we're going to talk about the hell of adolescence. If I gave you $1 million to go back to middle school, would anyone take it? What, 1? Yeah, 2. I wish Allison 3. I wish Allison was here to hear that middle school, being 10, 11, 12 years old, is sometimes the hardest part of our entire life. There are bullies that you can't trust. There are teachers who make your life so hard they must hate me. There's your parents who you love on Tuesday, but on Wednesday they're just ruining your life. Maybe the most difficult thing about being that age, Jesus is 12 in this story. It's our best guess at it. One of the hardest things about being that age is the expectations. Finally, for the first time in your life, there are real expectations. You have a permanent record, which isn't fair because this is the very time you start having these feelings with no explanation whatsoever, and people say, act your age, and you say, I am acting my age. This is a terrible age. When I was 12, you know what movie came out? Big. Tom Hanks. I mean, talk about speaking to my soul. All I wanted to do, I was a foot shorter than everyone in my grade. Partly because I had skipped a grade, so I was younger, but partly because, puberty was miles ahead. So I'm a foot shorter than everyone, and Big comes out. All I want to do is be big. I want to be a man as fast as I can. Do you know what shows being a man better than anything to a 12-year-old boy? Shaving. Because that 14-year-old boy who has a mustache first in class, man, those kids drove me crazy. Like, how do you do that? I would squeeze and nothing would happen. I would go in the mirror and I'd look for that one hair to come out and nothing would happen. So I would steal the razor and I'd soap up and lather up and I'd flip the razor to this dull side just to practice what it would be like to shave. Some of you did that. Some of you, yeah. Don't laugh just at me. All of us, when we are 12, we want to practice adulthood. Whatever we think that means, we want to practice adulthood. So I would practice by bossing the cat and dog around. I would tell them what to do, because that's what adults do, right? We just tell people what to do. And I would practice cursing, even though I didn't know what any of the words meant or when to use them. But I would practice, just in case when I got to be an adult, I could use them the right way. Because that's what I thought adults were. Tell people what to do, get angry, and grow beards. Jesus was 12, and do you think he wanted to practice being a man? I mean, for all the holy stuff out there, maybe what he thought about adulthood was communicate better, resolve conflicts peacefully, which would be great to be adults like that. But still something, I can't help but think that Jesus, as a boy, just wanted to practice independence. He wanted to just let his parents leave him alone for a while so he could be him. He wanted to be able to talk like a grown-up, and so he went and talked with grown-ups. And that might have resonated in your childhood. All of us, when we are first navigating the real world, we just want to grow up. We just want to learn. It's the human condition. We want to understand more, but we make these mistakes and we learn through them and experience these consequences, and slowly we figure out life. And Jesus grew in stature and in wisdom. And we all did, through the grace of God, little by little. 12 years later for me, 12 years after the movie Big came out, I could finally grow a beard. And for the longest time, it was just one of these little ironic beards that people in the city wear now, and they can put on flannel and feel like they're tough. But finally, when I was 25, I could finally grow a man's beard. It just had a life of its own. 25, I've got the whole thing. I've got a ponytail, which is just long and flowing. You can picture it very easily. I'm still practicing adulthood because I've got one foot in graduate school, staunchly in graduate school, the best I'm not looking forward to full responsibility. But so there I am. This friend of mine has a weird job. He ships fine art. So his job, if someone sells a $10,000 painting, he builds a special box for it, finds ways to pack it, and then delivers it. It's an important thing. Not you or I can't just carry a $100,000 vase. We have to make the right box. So that's what he did. He had an artist that he worked with named Arminius Minzakanayas. I can't pronounce. I still can't. I've worked for him. Mnazakaniaz. He's Armenian. And Arminius, at this time of his life, was starting to paint a lot of religious pictures. If you go on his website, if you could hear the way I just spelled that, he has fruit pictures and still life, but then he has a few religious pictures, and he was on this kick of painting very realistic. I mean, you could just see the creases in people's smiles and frowns. Well, he needed a Jesus. And he read in this crazy book, it's called the Gospel of Peter. It was written about 700, 800 years after Jesus was around. He read in the Gospel of Peter that Jesus had ruddish hair. He gets that from the Old Testament, says that David had ruddish hair. Jesus is 33 generations farther, so clearly he must have red hair too. I don't know why. Long story short, I got to be Jesus. I had a job modeling as Jesus for a year, and it paid for all my beer in seminary, which was pretty good job. But I would go to Arminius' studio, and I would kind of sit or pose or whatever our thing we were doing, and I would try to look like Jesus. I would try to practice holiness. Well, how do you do that? How do you practice holiness? How do you try to think in a way that gets your face to be Jesus-like? I would try to think about peace. I would try to recite Bible verses. I would try to confess whatever sin happened to me when I was using my paycheck to buy that beer that we just mentioned. Whatever it was, I was trying to practice holiness, and I don't think I was doing any better job than when I was 12 practicing adulthood. In our studio, in seminary, in life, I was just trying to grow into, the best I could, into this man that Jesus wanted me to be. And I think a lot of us try to do that. You try to grow into who Jesus wants you to be, and we stumble, and we make mistakes, and we try to understand. And little by little, we figure out our faith. And this spiritual adolescence is just as much a part of the human condition of learning our life, little by little, day after day. I'm 37 now. I can grow a beard. I can shave anytime I want. Some of you probably want me to start shaving because this looks a little ridiculous right now. The thing is that now my feet are both in actual adulthood. I'm not separated anymore. And when I hear the story that Mary Lou brings up, none of us really resonated with the 12-year-old Jesus, but I resonate with the priest. Because it's my job when 12-year-olds come in here to chat with them about the questions of life and questions of God. And that's all of a sudden, how did I get this responsibility? All of a sudden, how is it my job to guide these people in their own journeys of adolescence? And you're in the same boat, because last week, little Odin, you pledged, as he was being baptized, or before he was being baptized, you pledged that you would nurture and care for him. The Presbyterian Church, we have one of the little things we point at is called the priesthood of all believers. It means there's no separation. This is not a high pulpit. I am 4 inches off the ground here. No difference between me and all of you. We are all in this together to nurture and care for each other. And so that's what you said last week, is that you wanted to help this young boy grow in years and in wisdom. And so whether it's in this church or whether you pledge that in your life or your job or whatever, At some point, you go from this period of growing up to being grown up. And all of a sudden, you are not practicing life anymore. You are living. And the consequences become more real. And the mistakes become more magnified. And the learning, well, are we still learning? Do we stop at some point and just go with what we have? I mean, at 12, you had grades, and you had teachers, and you had coaches, and you had potential, and you had these steps to take in your life. You don't have that anymore. No one's grading you. There's not college applications waiting. So are you still learning? Genesis 2 and 3, a lot of people, when they read that story, it's the Adam and Eve and the fall thing. A lot of people who read that story think it is an allegory about growing up. We start in life as naked and innocent. We start in life as unashamed about the world, and then all of a sudden something happens, and we are responsible. We get kicked out of the garden, and we have to work. All of a sudden we carry this guilt with us everywhere we go. And life gets hard out of the garden. People are supposed to take care of us then. Now we have to take care of people. Adam and Eve, when they get kicked out, the first thing that happens to them is kids. Jesus. I mean, that's not fair. Right when they're supposed to become adults and find responsibility, the first thing that gets thrown in their lap is the biggest responsibility they could have. Right? Because, Mary Lou, she said it in the introduction that many of you, when you relate to that story, you feel like the anger and the terror and the fear all wrapped up with Jesus' parents there. I kind of hoped that Mary Lou would read it in the voice that she actually would have said if Luke and Samantha were lost. Let's picture it. Luke and Samantha were lost for 3 days. Okay. How many of you would have said, "Oh, child, why did you break my heart like this? We've been looking at you for 3 days." Some of you would, and then give them a hug. Some of you would say, "Child, why have you treated us like this, you brat? We've been looking for you for 3 days. We've been freaking out." Great anxiety, that's the word, freaking out. Some of us would have yelled, some of us would have hugged. All the things in your life that you do not get to practice. Parenting is one of the hardest. It is the most important. The kid wanders off, it's up to you. The kid mouths off to his mother, it's up to you, Joseph. Kids start shaving with the backside of the razor, it's up to you to send them to therapy. So parents in this room, did you ever make a mistake raising your children? Yeah. Anyone who had parents, do you think your parents made mistakes? Yeah. Anyone who had grandparents, do you think your grandparents made mistakes with your parents? The other side of it, parents, do you think you ever learned anything about yourself from your kids? Do you think your parents ever learned anything about themselves because of you? And Mary treasured all these things in her heart, the good and the bad. And again, it becomes the human condition. You make mistakes, you learn stuff. You make more mistakes, you learn more stuff. It is as though there is something in the world. It is as though the world is somehow weaved together with a thread of mercy and grace. But mercy is the quality of not getting some consequences that you deserve. Grace is getting some merits for things that you don't deserve. And unless you are just completely clouded by cynicism, as we grow up and we gain things from our mistakes, it is as though the world is shaped and formed by mercy and grace. If the world were just fair, that's what, 4-year-olds, they want the world to be fair. 12-year-olds are a little over the fairness. Sometimes adults want the world to be fair again. If the world were really fair, that would mean failure equals failure and success equals success, and that's the end of the story. But we live in a world just surrounded, just soaked in with growth and wisdom coming through stumbling, coming through mistakes. And especially at adolescence, but praise God when it continues forever, we can learn 2 stories any given day. On one hand, we can learn how just hard the world is, because it is hard, and it's painful, and it's exacting. And it's up to us to treat people how they deserve to be treated, and it's up to them to treat us how we deserve to be treated. We can learn that every day, or we can learn, you call it God, call it Spirit, call it whatever, the universe you want. Every day you can see something slowly teaching you that the world is merciful, and the world is forgiving, because we have second chances. and we give second chances, and our mistakes make us stronger. And we celebrate beauty that just sneaks up on us without our knowledge or awareness, and we can give praise for the comfort that lands at exactly the right moment. Every day, kids, adults, we have choices to fall into the trap of believing the world works on reciprocity and merit and desert, or we can redeem all the brokenness. We can learn about grace. We can teach each other about grace. We can give thanks for all that we've come through and help others to come through their difficulties. Every day we can fight the battle of retribution and revenge, or we can dance through the story of patience and reconciliation. Every day we can hold on to the pains that we've learned. Every day we can hold on to the pains that we learned through our life, maybe when we were 12, when we had a 12-year-old, or we can start the tremendous and difficult grace-filled process of letting go, maybe taking a step toward just setting down those heavy burdens. We can start putting down the weight that other people put on us, the weight that we heap on ourselves. Maybe start opening toward the freedom and the light that has tried to shine through in this world. Now, when things get really hard to do, when it's hard to remember that the world is so filled with that grace, when we are clouded with that cynicism, when it's hard to reconcile the suffering we feel, Jesus has a little reminder, a little mark of remembrance along the way. And it's a meal. It's a meal to remember that the world is infused with redemption. And it started at a scary time when Jesus was sitting with his closest friends, and he told them that soon he would die. And they said, "That's not fair. I don't understand it. That doesn't make sense in my worldview. It's not fair that you have to die. How could you? It sounds a terrible plan." And yet something good came out of it. And yet something about the whole world was redeemed here. And this meal is our way to remember that God can draw something good out of all circumstances. God can draw mercy from our life and grace from all that swirls around. And God invites all of us to this table so that we might grow in wisdom. Let us pray. The Lord be with you. Lift up your hearts. Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.